upset about it.
Martha, would you please mute yourself?
Yeah, that'd be nice.
I think I am muted.
Thank you. To order the policy session for the Board of County Commissioners on December 13, 2023. County Administrator Gary Schmidt, you're up.
Thank you, Chair Smith. All commissioners are present today. Commissioner Schrader is on Zoom. She is here, so all 5 of you are present. Your policy session today is Clackamas Village Development and Budget Update, presented by Health, Housing, and Human Services team. They are Adam Brown, the Deputy Director of Health, Housing, and Human Services, and Vahid Brown, the Housing and Community Development Deputy Director within Health, Housing, and Human Services. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Chair Smith, Commissioners. Adam Brown, Deputy Director, Health, Housing, and Human Services.
Good morning, Chair Smith, Commissioners. Vahid Brown, Deputy Director, Housing and Community Development Division.
Welcome. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. We're here with a project update and seeking your approval to move forward with Clackamas County's plans to expand on the village-style transitional housing community on the vacant lot next to our current Veterans Village. We're going to keep our remarks brief this morning and leave plenty of time for questions and discussion about this project and how it fits into our overall recovery system of care. In response to community need for emergency shelter and transitional housing, the Health, Housing, and Human Services Department, in partnership with the Department of Transportation and Development, has been planning for the development of a new transitional housing village at the site adjacent to the Veterans Village. The proposed project was included in the Shelter and Housing Projects Plan and Board Engagement Strategy that was approved by the board during a policy session on December 7th, 2022. It was also included in discussions over the past 6 months about uses of our one-time carryover balance of supportive housing services measure funds. The proposed project site has been under lease by H3S from the Clackamas County Development Agency since 2018, when the Veterans Village was originally developed. At the business meeting on November 20th, 2023, the board approved a property transfer intergovernmental agreement between H3S and the Development Agency to permanently transfer ownership of the property to H3S and pave the way for this expansion of village-style transitional shelter at the site. Included in your packet of materials is the site plan, which includes 8 pods of 3 units for 24 total housing units, 2 shared bathroom pods with 3 bathrooms each for a total of 6 bathrooms, a communal kitchen and laundry unit, staff office and meeting space, landscaped outdoor space and outdoor communal space, and parking, all of which is contemplated to be ADA accessible. Vahid's going to share with you some details about how people will be placed into this program and the services that will be offered on site.
Thanks, Adam. So the vision for the program design is that it would be operated as a transitional housing program. So that was kind of an intermediate step between emergency shelter, which is short-term, and permanent housing. So it's a longer-term stay with intensive on-site supportive services, up to 24 months typically, with the intention of assisting folks that would benefit from that additional structure and on-site services and getting the preparation that they need to move on and succeed in permanent housing after the village placement. So it's a transitional housing program. Assessment and referral would come through the Coordinated Housing Access Program, like it does for the Veterans Village and other transitional housing programs. So in our weekly case conferencing, we identify households by vulnerability and household type and match them with the best available program in our continuum of programs and care. Supportive services, as I said, would be provided on site. So there'd be an intensive programming at the village community. This would include recovery-oriented service plan development with each participant by a case manager assigned to the participant. The brokering or provision on site of a range of supportive services as needed by the individual to support their stability and preparation for transition into permanent housing, which could be behavioral or physical health care, it could be addiction and recovery services, it could be vocational remediation services. The whole suite of these things would be either available on site or through brokering of services with partner organizations. The population to be served in a village of this type with the single room occupancy pods is best suited for single adult households, not households with children. So that would be the population identified to be served in the program. No further population delimitations have been made in the program design at this time.
Any other information?
Yeah, just real briefly, over the past 6 months, the project team has been working with the architect to move from the initial design concepts to more detailed plans that have allowed for preliminary costing estimates and that will be needed for permitting and carrying out formal solicitations for construction services and program operations. The initial high-level costs for one-time capital improvements are estimated to be approximately $3 million, and the costs for ongoing program operations are expected to be approximately $1.5 million. Costing will not be finalized until the formal solicitations for construction services and program operations are carried out and the contract terms are negotiated. And in the meantime, we've prepared a high-level budget proposal for you, which utilizes our supportive housing services funds, both the one-time capital, which was included in our carryover plan from you all, along with $1.5 million of the ongoing funding for the supportive services. So that's all the prepared remarks that we have for you, and we're happy to take questions and support the conversation.
Thank you for this presentation. In the document, you say you're going to contract out with a CBO, correct?
Correct.
And do you put an RFP for that?
Yes.
And when will that happen?
We're shooting for both the construction solicitation and the services solicitation to go out shortly after the first of the year.
Thank you. You say operations of 1.5 million per year, or?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, that's quite a lot for 24 people. Okay, good. I know commissioners will have questions about this. Commissioner Scholl?
Yes, thank you. This project is different from most of the tiny house villages that we see in the region. Most of them are designed on a blacktop area with mobile cubicle, maybe 8 by 9 or thereabouts, housing constructed of a metal frame with fiberglass insulated panels that are very durable. But it looks like they look like a temporary concept to transitional housing. This project is designed, and the buildings are not cubies, they're actually little houses, if you will, on a foundation. So this design is for a much more permanent approach. So one concern is that when it comes time to final design, that we ensure that it's a very durable design, very durable materials inside and out, okay, so they'll last. One of the questions I have is that in looking at a triad concept to react, for the county to react to some of the social problems we have today with mental health, addiction, homelessness, that we're looking at a project for navigation and intervention to bring those people in need in contact with the services that the county has. 2, to provide safety off the street, transitional housing like we're looking at today. And 3, to look at a project for those people who need in-house, longer-term addiction recovery or mental health help. Those 3 things. So one of the things that comes to mind is that as these 3 projects come online, what are we doing to ensure that we have a very effective transportation capability between these this triad of care, if you will? So I don't know if that's something you're looking at now, but I think we need to look at that. I believe that the transportation part between those 3 different pieces of the triad need to be well thought out.
Yeah, Commissioner, I appreciate that concern, and we know that, limited access to means of transportation is a barrier for folks. And so in a world where we have, immediate safety off the streets, resources like a resource center, and we're trying to usher people into short-term emergency shelter options, and then transitional housing options like this village, and help people get to and from the appointments, whether, we're bringing resources on site or we're helping people get to those places. We know that sort of connectivity between those resources is really important, and certainly will be built into the program design to make sure that lack of access to transportation is not a barrier to people getting access to the services that they need.
Yeah, good. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner West.
Thank you. This is really cool. For a couple questions, is this going to be both sexes? Is it going to be men and women in this space? And have we had success with that modeling with it, with not separating the sexes?
Yes, Commissioner West, we have. That is the model at the Veterans Village.
Okay. I thought so, yeah. And can you, as we talk about this care continuum from street-level homelessness to stabilization to temporary supportive housing to, as you transition to longer-term housing, workforce, this whole thing we've talked about, where would you say this sits, and who in this population, how long do they stay there? What are the kind of boundaries and limits around length of stay? I'm just curious. And where does it fit as we talk about filling those gaps of care?
Yeah, great question. It's in the continuum of safety off the street, so it's not quite at permanent housing placement, but it's pretty far from the edge of, I think that what Commissioner Schull was talking about, kind of the huts on the parking lot. That's really just an emergency shelter intervention that should be less than 2 months. It should be about 45 days of stay there before you move to the next thing. At this transitional housing program, the limits of stay typically are around 24 months with the wisdom of our providers guiding how that's implemented. Sometimes it's 25 months, right? And that's okay if that's what's necessary. There's sufficient progress with addressing the barriers that are running up against the 24-month deadline. But that's typically for these kinds of programs the guardrails for the length of stay.
So there's a treatment, if necessary, a treatment component accessible, like quick and easy access to MAT or medical assistance treatment. There's access to the wraparound services that would allow somebody to be successful for a longer residential stay.
That's right. That's the idea, that it would, and that does occur at the Veterans Village. So the Do Good Multnomah staff that support Veterans Village and social services, veteran services staff that frequently visit there and broker services do transport, to speak to Commissioner Schull's question, participants at the Veterans Village to specialty care settings like treatment and that kind of thing.
Thank you. And so we're right, 24 individuals here. I want some thoughts, and then another question is, as I'm curious about, I think Veterans Village has been a success. I think it's really cool what we did there and what we were able to, before I was here, I know Commissioner Salvis did a ton of work on this and this board to get that up and running. What do we learn? I'm curious about what we learned from that experience next door, and how that's setting us up for success for this endeavor that we're doing now, and how that was a pilot that's still going. So I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that are showing up in the materials you have that are already lessons learned, kind of baked in. I mean, just on a very mundane level, the number of bathrooms is greater per participant than it is at the Veterans Village. That's been a challenge, and so really attending to the sufficiency of the community amenities. That's represented here. That is a learning and an implementation of that learning. I think that the years now of operating the Veterans Village has also illustrated the need for those connections and linkages to other ancillary services and supports and specialty care settings. And that's going to be, something that will be front of mind as we solicit for a CBO to provide services here. we aren't not able to kind of construct a world where all of the complicated needs can be met necessarily in one place, but we need to have that system of care in our community where those needs can be met. So these things need to be spoke and wheel.
Totally, yeah. Commissioner Scholl and I visited and just checked in with surrounding businesses. Right next to this is an operational business that has had some issues. I think we're working hard to mitigate those, and we really value their good partnership with us. I mean, and we've been really, I think, blessed to have businesses that have been sharing the struggles, but I feel like they're willing to like go on this journey with us. So we want to respect that. One of the needs that came up, and I don't know if as we look at how we're having this built out, is the back fencing between, or the fencing specifically with the trust company and the surrounding area being more robust, like more secure, not only for our residents, but also for the businesses. There's things like, he was concerned about a fire that was once started outside of the fence. There was, it wasn't as secure. And I know that was like a big concern, that having us helping maybe with the fencing around that. I know that some other issues with the auto body shop, it sounds like we've mitigated those and we've worked to do that. And we're trying to be super responsive to that. So I want to, are we still, as we get closer to this and we start having drawings, are we still doing this collaborative outreach with those neighbors?
Yeah, and Commissioner, I envision this only increasing as we grow the site there. Like, we have to have the support and participation of our neighbors. We can't commit to one-off issues. We can't commit to those things not happening, right? One-off issues. I think what we can do is we can develop strong trust and respect, county respect for the business owners and the livelihood that's connected to the viability of their business, and being good neighbors and being responsive. And there are tensions around a lot of our projects. And what we've found in general is that when we lean into those tensions, that folks are really focused on solutions. They understand the need for this kind of infrastructure in the community, and what they want from us is partnership and responsiveness, and they want a venue for us to hear their concerns. So to the extent that we give them those things, I feel like the community is very supportive. And so that's our commitment here, is be good neighbors, be respectful, and be responsive.
I appreciate that. And I think we just also have to be aware, like, if we need to beef up that fencing to give peace of mind, and that's not always the cheapest thing to do, but we need to find how to do that to bring to that business owner as a good partner. I think we should be prepared to do that. I'll just throw that out there. That's my thought. Yeah.
Of course, we're always willing to make those kind of reasonable accommodations to meet the community need. That's perfectly appropriate.
Really good work. I think it fits within the recovery-oriented system of care. I think you've articulated it well. I wish we could fit a little bit more on this property. One last question is, I think it's super important as we build out these capacities, and I think I see some of it here, is, are we, as we build the infrastructure, considering how it's trauma-informed in how we build this out? So I think almost as important as the actual resources to individuals, but the living environment in which they have is also trauma-informed. So I want to make sure we're doing that through this lens, and we've really looked at that seriously.
Yeah, we have, and it's incorporated here, and that's why, Commissioner Scholl raised the idea of the more pallet shelter concept, and we feel like, this takes a little bit more investment, and you'd be surprised, it's not actually that much more investment. By the time you set up a pod village and you plumb and you wire and you do all these things, you've spent a couple $1 million.
Yeah.
This is almost a scenario where you can spend $1 million more, have a semi-permanent structure that provides much more dignity, and to your point, a trauma-informed living situation for folks. So we feel pretty good about, we're not in a resource-scarce environment, so let's just go ahead and try to do something right to increase the successful outcomes for people.
Yeah, my first thought when I saw this is that it was built in a way that it built a sense of community, and I think that's core to that system. So I could see that initially, but I'm glad you guys took that into your thought process. So I have no other questions, but thank you for letting me ask them, and thanks for being here. It's really great.
Thank you. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, I got a few questions. So let's just talk about the rendering a little bit with regard to the layout, knowing that the Veterans Village had somewhat of an open one door of each pod faced other doors, and it was at least visible from the other modules, the facility modules and so forth. So they had some kind of a ability to eyeball everything with some blind spots, if you will, where you can't see everything. But the way this is laid out, is this something that we're wedded to, or was that taken into consideration? The blind spots or sight, being able to have eyes on it from the modules. This looks like something that you would have to walk around constantly to get a good idea what's happening.
So that's a good question. You do have line of sight. You can look down the corridors of the pods to see like the front of the units. One of the key considerations here was situating the pods in this way to allow the ramps to be structured as they are so that it is ADA accessible. So you have one central path, and then you have a shared kind of platform. And we were actually just talking about this yesterday with the architect. We want these to be accessible units, and so structuring it this way gives you some economy of scale on that, the ability to build, just the two platforms for access. Whereas if the units were situated in a circle or semicircle, it makes that a little bit harder. But we can, I'm happy to talk with our staff, the project team, talk with the architect again, and see if they have any. We have folks with a lot of operational experience, right? Even running the Vets Village. We'd be happy to inquire with them about whether or not they feel like this gives them the physical security, that line of sight that they need to effectively run the site. So we can look into it.
So, okay, appreciate that. And the other thing is that the doors are facing each other in very close proximity. Obviously, they're adjoined where there's 3 units per. Does that, in the practical aspect of that kind of population, does that give them perhaps the level of privacy that they might be more accustomed to, in their current environment maybe? Or does this lessen that? Is that from that getting themselves comfortable, is that approach, is there a model where that is, or some thought behind that where that is more effective than the individual pods?
I think it's a matter of trying to accommodate as much programming as possible, serve as many people with the available land. There are successful villages in the region that have a multiple unit per structure approach. And so to my knowledge, from the programmatic side, that hasn't come up as a drawback of, but we could, again, look at kind of programmatic input.
Yeah, I understand the need for the programming, but I'm just really thinking about them as the resident, those with all those unique experiences and traumas and so forth, and noise and all those things that might find disturbing. Like if they have someone in the room next door that's making a lot of noise. In this case, that would affect two residents as a result of one, right? So those are the things, and I guess I've done a lot of, you all too, you'll have your own experiences, I value that, but we have done a lot of tours at the Veterans Village, and a lot of people pointed out some of those issues, and I recall those conversations with people from around the country that have come out. We've given, as you know, a lot of tours. So that's something that I thought people observed and say, geez, that's actually an asset the way this is laid out. It gives them that level of privacy. So, just knowing that, what I know of that population, some, not all, I'm not trying to stereotype, but there are those considerations. Smoking, for example, right? Just habits that might disturb others or disturb them. So I just wanted to know if we're flexible here, knowing this is not a resource issue. It's really about accommodating that population to make sure they're successful and we're successful. So just stepping outside the operational aspect as far as staffing it and all of that for that population, I want to make sure that most consideration is given to that for those folks.
Of course, Commissioner, and I think I definitely understand the question. I'm eager to hear from our folks with like the operational knowledge of striking that right balance between respecting the unique experiences of everyone, giving them the space that they need, while also trying to create a sense of community so that there are social connections, accountability, those sorts of things. So to me, that's the balance that we have to strike, and we definitely want to respect people's agency and their needs for their physical space and things like noise, right? We don't want that to be disruptive. So we'll definitely talk with the project team and put something together for you in writing about that.
Okay. Was there any thoughts or accommodations between smokers and non-smokers?
We haven't talked about that specifically, but we can inquire
Okay. Yeah,
about that as well.
Just another learned experience I have witnessed and heard, so I just want to make sure all those are factored in. The other question I have,
Commissioner, can I just comment on that? So we, if you recall, on the Crisis Stabilization Center, we have contemplated 2 covered areas out back. Those are the designated smoking areas. So, well, this is a big, giant outdoor space, so we haven't talked about that specifically, but I think one of my presumptions has been something similar here, right? That we have designated smoking areas. There's plenty of space for folks to get away. So I think operationally, that is generally how things work at shelter sites and whatever. We respect there are smokers, but we also sanction that smoking so that it doesn't impact other people. But we'll follow up about that.
yep, okay. The other question I have is again, I know we're not resource scarce here, but, you know, again, it's still public money and people have eyes on it, so I just want to make sure we're being as responsible as possible. Where did these dollar amounts derive from? I mean, do you have actually construction people saying we can do it for this?
So we worked with the architect who has the industry knowledge. They put together a basic outline of the costs, and that's what it was based on. And we know that there's interest from parties out there. You recall we carried out the RFI, right, for shelter. And agencies like the home builders, for example, really wanted to bring a community solution forward. So we're hopeful that the combination of this high-level costing coupled with really resourceful agencies like that will bring to bear the resources that we need, both like the actual dollars in this budget and a really committed community partner that wants to make this work.
Right. So I'm presuming, the way it's laid out, that you maximize the space, and that's about the occupancy that you can put here. So just a little bit, just my instincts tell me that having at least 3 or 4 pods, maybe individual pods, might be a good, it might be a learned experience if there's a preference for people, or that becomes a solution that we don't build it and then we realize we've got this challenge. So just consideration maybe of looking at, instead of having a 3-unit facility, maybe a few individual ones for people that maybe prefer that or that might work better operationally. That said, the other thing I have is, and this is probably one of the more painful memories. I'm looking at Emily way in the back there. And most painful memory was the kitchen aspects and all those challenges. So I know we learned a lot, but how is that being applied here?
So I could bring Emily up to share that prior experience, but I can tell you that even just
You don't have to.
Yeah, okay.
We both lived it. But she really lived it on a more full-time basis than I did.
So over the last 2 weeks, we're in kind of the rapid iteration phase of these designs where they're in pretty good shape. And now we're doing things like, what about the cabinet space in the kitchen? How are those tables configured in the kitchen? So even just yesterday, between last week and yesterday, the architect had redone some of the kitchen space with the lens around some of those learnings, actually, and resituated the tables, moved the actual kitchen over to a different side of the building, added more cabinet space. So that's happening now of like, hey, we had an initial sketch. What about that works and what doesn't? Let's improve it.
Okay, so these other accessory buildings, kitchen included, would be built from the ground up. They would not be modules, or we're trapped into that state regulatory issue about modular structures. This would circumvent that challenge, or not circumvent, but we'd eliminate that problem. Emily, do you know what I'm saying? So if you don't understand, I'd like to hear from Emily, if I could, at least have some security that we're not going to have that same challenge with the kitchen and the stoves and all of that. So these are modular, or they're going to be built as, you know, bricks and sticks, ground up, a stick building, not subject to the regulatory aspects of a modular building under state code.
We anticipated that there may be questions like this, so we called the architect here today with us. And so we have Drew here from the architectural firm. If you want, we can bring him up to talk a little bit about
Drew,
that
please come
aspect.
forward and have a seat. Introduce yourself and why you're here. And while you're talking about this, there is a term out there being used for this type of construction called trauma-informed design. Are you using any of that thinking in this particular
Yeah, so
area?
thank you for having me. And I'm Drew Schreiner with Base Design Architecture. And would you like me to start with that?
Doesn't matter. You can address Commissioner Savas's question.
Yeah, to your specific, so they are designed to be all modularly built right now. The kitchen, everything is sized and being designed with that intention. And so with that, that is also falling into a, accessibility, energy code, and structural code. And that was kind of the three main drivers of the design.
Okay, so I'm sorry, maybe I didn't use the right terminology here. So there's the mobile modular state code, right? They build something for modular use, mobile use, right? And it becomes like like what we have at the Veterans Village today, right? That comes under a certain regulatory thing with the state, which is unique to building housing. So I understand, so when you say modular, you're not meaning modular from that level. You're talking about modular as far as building it on site.
So to clarify, yes, the process will be, we will go through the state to permit them as through the modular state process. And so we need to go through that RFP process so that we have a general contractor on board, and that will be a modular contractor.
Okay, have you discussed this with Emily?
Yes,
And
she
the
is.
experiences we had before? Because there are some
so,
serious constraints, very hard learned lessons. So I just want to make sure we get that on the table now.
Emily Klepper, our policy advisor, would you like to come forward and take a shot at some of these answers?
Thank you, Chair. Hi. Good morning, Commissioners. I think, Commissioner, what you're speaking to is the challenges we had with an existing modular trailer we were purchasing and then a retrofitting to meet the kitchen needs of the village. We're not doing that in this case. We're building it as a kitchen unit and a community space in a modular kind of design, and that will be permitted by the state. So we won't hopefully, Drew, correct me if I'm wrong, but we won't encounter the same kinds of conflicts or constraints from the state.
yeah, so
Does that make
now I'm understanding. So that was more of a retrofit sort of scenario. That's way more complicated when you try to bring that up to a commercial code level and get a reviewer to approve that. You have to bring the structure up to current code, you have to energy code. So we're doing all of that in mind from the new build and it being modular. The modular should not be any sort of issue because it's modular. It will actually, we've found that the state is actually a little easier process to get through in terms of permitting timelines and everything.
Okay, great. Thank you for that.
Since the architect is here, regarding trauma-informed design, are you familiar with the term?
I'm familiar. To answer your question, we have not necessarily used that as a baseline or as a standard, but that is something that I'm happy to really start to roll into.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm not interested in redesigning this entire project. You do have a budget. I don't want to see a lot of add-ons from this commission that increases the cost. Commissioner Savas wants 3 individual pods. Is there an increased cost to that? And you don't know that, but that's something that needs to be answered. And you don't have to have the answer right away, I understand.
I mean, just to take we're very diligent with input about how many residents makes a successful community. and that being a top priority of the Veterans Village really showcases that it's a really close-knit community. So getting those numbers to a higher level could make that potentially problematic. So we're interested in getting a little bit more
Okay.
input from service providers.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I understand this is a work in progress. Please keep the board informed as we go forward, because we're very interested in this. Before I go to the other commissioners, Commissioner Schrader has left the Zoom meeting and is traveling into the office for a meeting at noon. She says she does support this project very much. She was hoping it would be ended in time for her to vote on it. I don't think that's going to be possible, but she does support it. You talked, a question was raised about smoking. And for the record, and for anybody listening, is this a drug-free and alcohol-free livability situation?
So it is not clean and sober housing, but the program rules state that people need to maintain, there's no open consumption of alcohol. It's not permitted on site. We know that people coming into this type of living situation are coming off the streets and are living with substance use challenges. That's a practical reality. But, Chair, there's no permitted use or anything like that on site. In fact, it's specifically prohibited.
That's why I wanted that to be on the record for anybody listening, that there's no misconceptions. I assume that there would be. I assume there's treatment available for whatever they may need, and that's one of the reasons we're doing this. Commissioner West and then Commissioner Scholl.
Yeah, I'm glad we're talking about trauma-informed design or how it's built out. I spoke to that too. So however we do this, if there's any tweaks, I think that we just want to keep that in mind. I actually like the idea, if necessary, for somebody's treatment needs, so we can be more diverse within the population, more tailored population. Maybe it does make some sense, like medically, to have somebody that needs the one or two or maybe three individual areas where they have singular living that it fits that specific need of that person. I don't know if we have that. Another thing that through just lots of research and touring these different sites and in Texas and here, and I hear come up even with patients in the emergency department that don't want to come to the emergency department because they have a pet, right? And so it's a real reality. I don't know how much we run into this. I think a lot of places have shown real success with some type of accommodation, so we can get those people off the streets, and even a little kennel, or there's been some place where you take personal responsibility and it's structured, and I see Vahid nodding his head as if you know where this has been very successful. I think, I don't know if we have the space. I know that not all of the space I've been out there is totally buildable, but there might be some space that could accommodate, our canine friends, and allow us to kind of just learn from that also. It kind of hits that more holistic approach. I don't know, what do you think? Is there a way to look at doing something like that successfully here?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
and that's a component in the Veterans Village, and there's even community animals, right, with the ducks and
Yeah, that's
all
right,
of
there are
that.
ducks.
So, yeah, the furry members of families that come along with folks to the village setting, we will definitely be accommodating them.
Okay, and I just didn't see like a little kennel or anything formally set up to accommodate that and what that structure like. As we learn these things, we learn about all these little details that actually
Yep.
make a pretty big impact and difference when we come across them. So that was my question. Is the electricity going to be underground? Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, because I saw the Veterans Village,
Yeah.
and there's a lot overhead. There's a lot, and so I maybe that's another thing we learned from the Veterans Village too. But yeah, okay, thank you.
Commissioner Scholl?
Yes, thank you, gentlemen, for the information this morning. Let's see, it was Monday of last week. I drove up to Longview, Washington, and got a tour of the city of Longview, their project, their 50 tiny house village they run in partnership with the Salvation Army. And I was very impressed with the discipline and good order I found there. some observations. The entire project was fenced, and there was a locked gate, and nobody came in unless they were an authorized person to be inside the project. They did say that there's a very strict prohibition against any alcohol or drugs coming into the project, but they knew that there were some residents that were still fighting their addiction problem, be it alcohol or something else. There was a very strict expectation for good behavior and respect for other residents. Again, they had to sign a document saying they understood the rules. Again, there was very controlled access. There was no one allowed in an individual's tiny house. Just, they're the only person that's supposed to be in there. There were community areas and community bathrooms. They also had a very strict regulation on how much individual articles and equipment you could bring in. And on smoking, there was absolutely no smoking in the tiny houses, only in authorized areas. And so anyway, I mention all that because, again, I was very impressed with how clean and orderly it was and how comfortable the residents were that I talked to. They're comfortable because of the respect and the compliance to the rules. So that's going to be important too in our project. Thank you.
Yeah, and Commissioner, that sounds a lot like a program participation agreement, which will be part of participating in this village. That's part of getting our service provider on. They have, their site operations manuals. Those things include program participation agreements that folks will sign when they're coming into the site.
Very nice. Any more questions or comments from commissioners?
Yeah, I do have one. So we just expand on the bathroom accommodations? What's in a unit? It's vague to me because I just see 2 ADA bathrooms and that's it. I assume there's showers, but where are those specifically?
So this version of the designs, I don't believe has the bathroom configuration. The version that we got yesterday does have the bathroom configurations. So I can share those with you, and we could get Drew to come up, but my recollection is that each has a toilet stall and a shower within the bathroom unit. So there's 6 of those combo shower toilets.
We're getting a head nod, that's all we need, thank you.
Okay.
And if you have those drawings, feel free to send them over.
Yep, I'll follow up after.
Right, so that gives you some more comfort. So just quickly, we could go back to, if we're going to make a motion to approve, I want to get your insight if my concern or suggestion that we look at individual modules is a valid one, worth pursuing or not. I know you got a lot of work done here, but just thinking about the individuals or some of the unique individuals, maybe wanting to having that private space because maybe they're loud or maybe they want that privacy or whatnot. Is that a reasonable thing that we can adjust, or is that not a reasonable thing we can adjust?
So here, I have, as we're talking about some of these things, making sure we have all our trauma-informed design elements included, things like pet, accommodations for pets, things like smoking shelters. The challenge sometimes with our public procurement processes is that we want to have every last little detail finalized before we even go out for solicitation. And then we're kind of handcuffed at that point based on that design. So my recommendation would be that, we're 95% here. We need to answer some of those questions, certainly worth considering. I would like to proceed with our solicitation, work with procurement to make sure we have some flexibility incorporated so that we can engage in an interactive process with our contractor and solve for some of the things that have been identified here. But even before then, I think we can attend to your question. But I'm really eager to get this solicitation going, because right, there's a sequence of events that we have to follow. And if we're, I want to make sure the board's wishes are met 100%, and I want to move fast too. I think we can do both. What I'm reluctant to do is punt approval to January or early February when we can attend to some of those things more formally into the design at this point.
Well, as long as there's a path to do that, that's my question, and there's a willingness or a desire to do that, and if that's expressed here, and that goes into the design, great. And you did mention one other selling point, I won't say a selling point, but for this conversation, and that is pets. All 4 pets understand that, but if you got a barking dog, do you think that in an environment like this, if they're inside the unit, that the neighbors, the neighboring units are going to tolerate that for very long? So just mindful, that's one more selling point for maybe have a few individual pods that have all the amenities we talked about, but just want to just experiences. Just want to put that out there.
Absolutely.
Chair, can I call the question?
Yes, I was going to say, Commissioners, there are recommendations on page 4 of the packet. Commissioner West, go ahead.
And definitely for the necessity of speed to move quickly on these essential pieces of infrastructure, I would like to move that we approve the funding plan and plans to proceed with solicitations for construction and program delivery services, with the understanding that we would like to continue to explore individual pods, pet services, and definitely focus on trauma-informed design.
There's a motion.
Second.
Commissioner West has made a motion. We approve option 1 with some add-ons, if possible. But Commissioners, option 1 does say we're approving the funding plan. I don't know if there's room in that for you to come back. And I assume if we do go individual pods, it's going to increase the cost. And I don't know how that's going to work, but, take a look at that. Commissioner Savas has seconded the motion. Commissioner Scholl?
Yes. I personally would like to defer to the expertise of our housing folks and our architect, who have put a lot of time into this thought process for this project. So I'm happy with proceeding with approving your recommendation, number 1, based on what you've presented today. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other further comments? Seeing none, Tony, please take the poll.
Commissioner Scholl.
Aye.
Commissioner Savas.
Aye.
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye, motion passes 4-0. Thank you very much. Gary, is there anything else?
That is it for this morning. You'll next convene at 1 p.m. for your planning meeting.
We will recess on this part of the part of the policy session and reconvene at 1 p.m., correct, Gary?
Yes.
Thank you very much.